Hi, my name is Peter. You're watching Tech Support, and today I'll be teaching you the basics of making an HDR image. HDR images are amazing because they can show a lot more details and sharpness than your normal images. HDR images are useful when you're shooting at scenes with really strong contrasts. For example, when you're shooting landscape photos with bright light from the sun and shadows on the side, it will be really hard to capture the details. However, when you shoot with an HDR image, you will be able to retain the details both on the dark and the bright sides. When shooting in low light, HDR image will give you a sharper and a brighter image than a non-HDR image. In general, HDR images will give you a strong contrast, great sharpness, and just a lot of details. HDR images are very fun to play with, and they can be used to create very interesting effects. Now, I'll teach you how to make your first HDR images. When making your HDR image, you will need your tripod, your camera, and your remote control to make your perfect shot. These equipments are important because they will keep your shots consistent and free of any movement. It is important to take at least 3 shots to make a decent HDR image. These shots are to be taken with different exposure values. The different exposure values allow you to capture the minute details in both the bright side and the dark side of your image. Here's an example. The camera that I'm using here is the Nikon D80. The way to adjust the exposure values is to use this plus sign button on your camera. A quicker way to shoot these shots is to use the bracket button on the camera. This is the button with the letters BKT. The BKT button allows you to take multiple pictures with different exposure values quickly. When the button is pressed down, the screen shows 0F and 2.0, as you can see here. Change the settings to 3F and remain at 2.0. When you do this, you are telling the camera to take the next 3 shots with an increment of 2.0 exposure values. After shooting with a different exposure value, you should always check out the histogram to see the photos you have taken. Knowing how to use the histogram will help you see the photos that are overexposed and underexposed. The histogram is a useful tool to determine the composition of light in your photo. On my Nikon D80, you can see the histogram by clicking on the preview button and then press the down button on the knob like so. Knowing how to use the histogram helps you see photos that are overexposed, underexposed, and also helps you see the contrast of the photos. The basic idea here is that you want to have your brightest shot, which is the one with +1 or +2 exposure values, with little or no bars on the left side of the histogram. Have your first shot, which is the one taken with exposure value at 0, with a good balance of spikes in the middle and not too much on the sides of the histogram. And you want to have your darkest shot, which is the one with -1 or -2 of the exposure value, with little or no bars on the right side of the histogram. When taking your shots, sometimes there are ghosts in the image. Ghosts are the moving subjects and they can ruin your shots. Most of the time, however, ghosts can be removed on software like Adobe Photoshop without too much trouble. After you have finished your shots, now you are ready to make your own HDR image. When you open Photoshop, go under the File tab to find Automate, and then click on the Merge to HDR Pro button. Click on Browse, and select your photos. Then hit OK. The program will then merge your photos together and create an HDR image. Now that you have your HDR image, it's time to play around with the sliders to get the look that you like. As you can see, Photoshop put these sliders on the right that can be used to adjust the image. You can choose to manually play around the sliders or use one of the presets to get a different look like so. or you can go back to default and adjust the settings manually. If you choose default, first thing you should do is to click on the remove ghost box. This will take any ghosts in the image will look more steady and sharper. And then what I like to do next is to go down to events and move the shadows to the right, and then I move the highlights to the left. By doing this, I can pull out a lot more extra details in the image. Since the image here that I got is getting too much blue colors, I can decrease the vibrance like this to get rid of the extra blues. Then I can put in more saturation to put more colors in the entire photo. Moving on to edge glow, notice that there's radius and strength. When you move the radius, you're affecting the size of the edge glow, which can be used to create a dramatic effect. Then, I will move the strength just a tad bit, so I don't overdo the edge glow. After you have finished the edge glow, now let's move on to tone and detail. Notice that there's gamma, exposure, and detail. I move up the detail just a little bit so I can see a lot more detail in the image. Afterwards, I turn up the exposure so that I can get the correct exposure for my photo. Last but not least, I can play around with the gamma to get an even better exposure that I would like to have. Feel free to play around with the settings until you can get the best look that you would like to have. After you have finished playing around with the sliders, hit OK. Then, Photoshop will create your final image. Thank you for watching. This is Tech Support. My name is Peter, and this is how you create your first HDR image.